Here, I've got a good question for you. I've been going through my mind and thinking about the way that if I weren't me, I might handle what's been going on with me and how I might communicate with you in a way that can teach you simple solutions. Are you the kind of person who doesn't take anything home with you from work? When I used to do hiring and training and management, one of the things I would always tell people, I did a lot of restaurants. And so I did training for a few ma and pa. And one of the things I would always tell people, because I figured it out pretty quick, the difference in the people who are going to stick around and the people who just are not going to make it. And that's the people who take the menu home. If you're a server and you don't know the menu, you're going to be fired soon. So the question I have for you is, are you the kind of person who brings things home? Because this morning I've already used a word that you don't know without defining it, for the sake of showing you what it looks like when I don't define all of my words and stop and qualify everything I say, and every time I shove you in a well, I don't also pull you out of the well. What it looks like is a 5 or a 2-minute video filled with words and concepts you've never heard anyone speak of before. And so I ask again, are you the kind of person who gets a job and then doesn't take any of the material home with you and read it? Are you the kind of person who never studies? Are you the kind of person who thinks that you can figure the job out on the job? And so then I wonder, why did you go through minimum 13 years of school? Why do you have a bachelor's degree? Do you know how many, can you guess how many students and people with bachelor's degrees I have trained who never bothered to read the orientation material? How many people have actually read their employee's handbook wherever they work, front to back, read it? How many of you have committed it to memory? How many of you have even bothered? You're the kind of people who just aren't going to succeed in life. If you aren't willing to take work into what you think of as your personal time, you will not succeed at life. You cannot succeed at life. You do not have a personal life. Your personal life is the time spent sleeping. Every minute that you are awake is on a ticking clock, and has been since about 4000 BC. But that clock has been ticking since, I guess, the 16 or 1500s or whatever. It used to be just the sun. If the sun was out, you owed your time to someone other than you. Now, what nobody wants to talk about, absolutely no one wants to talk about, is that the actual reason that birth rates across the planet are plummeting is because people of childbearing years are selfish and they don't take work into their private time because they think, because their parents loved them, or they were imitating someone whose parent did love them, that the time spent not at school was meant to be spent having a life. Your parents would tell you, here's $50, go have a life. Yeah, that's privilege and reward for managing your responsibilities. That's called a vacation. You buy those. In fact, having free time at all is hugely expensive. Hugely expensive. And it's been made hugely expensive by elites, tycoons, nobles, and actual royalty, because they're supposed to have even less free time than you. As a fabulously wealthy person or an entitled person, your time actually belongs to the thing that's generated you all that wealth. The reason that marquises and princes, etc., were allowed to live such fabulous lives and accrue such massive wealth was because they needed that wealth in order to do their day jobs, and their day jobs were government. And so as I walk around Zanesville and I see all these cops want to mean mug everybody they pass and use their giant armored vehicles to be aggressive dickheads on the road, I think about how do they spend their time after work. And you know how they spend their time after work? Doing everything they can to not get called back in. Making sure they can't be called back in. Either sleeping or getting hammered ass drunk. Committing to things that will keep them away from their actual commitments. And so how many things are you committed to that you actually commit to? 100%. Give your actual all to. You know, I'm lying here in a tent under a sleeping bag that I've finally gotten warm enough to be comfortable, just in time to have to get up with, when this 10% of my battery isn't going to last forever, and it's 5:30 in the morning. So, how much are you actually committed to? Because I could very easily just not be committed to being Shaggy Philalitea for YouTube, and I could just not charge my phone, and I could just read my books, and I could just go to the food bank, and I could just go to the library and read my books, and I could just loiter around this town that owes me nothing, well, actually owes me a lot, and which I owe nothing. I owe this town nothing. I owe you nothing. I put in my time. I paid my dues. And now I have a camp. Now I have a tent. And sure, maybe it's on stolen land, but all land is stolen. The reason that places like corporations don't want you squatting on the land is if you're there long enough and they don't know it, they lose the rights to the fucking land. The land that you're on becomes yours. That's why they don't want you doing that shit. I think it's only 4 or 5 years. It's a stunningly short amount of time. And the reason is, if somebody can live on your property and you not know it for whatever, a month, it's theirs now. It should be theirs now. By all ancestral rights, by every human right. If you can live on land, it's yours. Especially if you make it better. And so what I want to know is how you can think anything is yours, because the only thing you do is depreciate the world around you. Do you make anything better? What was the last thing you did that was beautiful? You know, I look in this McDonald's and I look in this Burger King and I look in Taco Bell, and none of these people is in uniform. Why are they not in uniform? Well, you're going to say they're trying to maintain a certain amount of independence, of individuality. That's why our private schools have uniforms and our public schools don't, because the private schools are trying to beat out individual. They're trying to beat the individuality out of you, and the public schools are trying to inculcate individuality. Okay, well, watch my extreme individuality video and explain to me why that's a good thing. Your individuality makes you stand out like a nail that needs to be banged down into the wood. What building is made of individual blocks that look like individuals and have an individual shape? And tell me what building that's made like that looks beautiful. You're going to go, oh, well, that one site in South America. And then I'm going to say, do you really mean that? Or do you think that because ancient aliens told it to you? And then we arrive on your personal ignorance. And then we arrive on, well, what do you do with your leisure time? And then we'll return to me telling you that I said a word that you can't know, and that word is leisure. You don't know what that word means. You think it means sit around time, and you think wrong. Leisure is the Greek word skoleo, which we say school. But your leisure time was something, if you had time to just do effectively nothing, if you had time to waste, you had time to study. You had time to learn. In the restaurant industry, we say, if you have time to lean, you have time to clean. And effectively, if you have time to sit around and do nothing, you have time to write a book. If you have time to sit around and do nothing, you have time to meditate. You have time to read a book. You have time to go find a philosopher to teach you. You have time to go make money, in other words. If you have time to sit around and do nothing, you have time to contribute. And if you're not contributing, what are you? Well, you're somebody else's expense. So why do you choose to live as someone else's expense? Not just on someone else's expense, not just at someone else's expense, as someone else's expense. When you go to work and you don't make that store money and you intentionally cost it money and you intentionally drive customers away, you're just an expense. And you understand that expenses are expendable, right? If you're not useful, you're expendable. Well, what did we used to do with expendable people in the ancient world? We used to throw them in rivers. Why do you want this? Why do you want to be this way? Why do you put yourself in a position to fail over and over and over again and then make it someone else's fault? Why? That's just rank stupidity. That's all that is. It just means you're too stupid to live. And so why do you choose that? I've been teaching myself and studying intensely in my free time since I was 5. I realized my parents weren't going to teach me to read, and that I was in deep shit because I was a minimum a year behind everybody else in my class because my parents didn't love me. There was no free time in my life. I had to steal my free time, my video game time, so I had something to talk about with the kids at school that wasn't my study and my sleep time. So I did most of my sleep, in fact, at school because I wasn't learning anything, because by high school I'd got myself so far ahead of my peers that I could waste 20 years and you wouldn't catch up. And I tried. I wasted as much of the intervening 20 years between 2005, my graduation, and today, it's October 16, I think? October 8, sorry. It's October 8. I did as much as possible to waste all of that, and look how many heads and shoulders above you I am. You want to talk about standing on the shoulders of giants and being able to see the future? There is a coming end. Disaster is headed for this world, not just the West. Britain is obsessed with the collapse of the West because the UK is going to be gone within the next handful of years. I said 50 earlier, but the way they're going, they're trying to get it done by the time Trump is reelected. They want to be Americans so fucking bad, especially in London. They want to be in the United States so fucking bad. Fine. Let them. That's what I say. I say take all these countries that want to send their refugees here and just make them territories. Not states, territories. And say you'll call that colonization, but you're fucking stupid. That's called globalization. And the territorialization is called conquest. It's called annexation. It's called peaceful conquest. And what that means is that our way of life and our culture is so superior that we just won. They just became us. And so we incorporated them into us. That's effectively what people describe the Greeks doing to the Romans, but that's absolutely not what happened. That's not the same. So what do you do with your leisure time? What do you do with your school time? Are you the kind of person who, when you get a new job, takes the material home and reads it and studies it and memorizes it? Or are you the kind of person who tries to get all that stuff done on the clock? Because if you're trying to get it done on the clock, someone else is doing it at home. And you will lose that job. Ultimately, you will lose any kind of respect or whatever it is that you want from an employer. You'll never get it. If you ever had it, you will lose it. It doesn't matter what your grades were in school. It doesn't matter what your GPA is. It doesn't matter where you went to school. If you can't do the job, you can't do the job. And if you won't take the job home to learn it, to master it, to get good at it, someone will. You know, it's so funny. I'm thinking about how that chief of police that I talked to wanted to condescend to me by going, "Do you know anything about sports?" Well, fuck you. You don't get to use a sports metaphor with me. You don't get to teach me right now. All right, well, fine. I do get to use a sports metaphor right now because I am teaching you right now. And so there's something that I have to say. The players who are the very best are the players who work until they're sleeping. And then they dream about their sport. And then they wake up thinking about their sport. Mental reps is what that's called. Going through mental repetitions. Practicing in your mind. Creating memories and then doing them right. And then building the muscle memory of having done the job properly because you practiced at home in front of the mirror. You read, you repeated out loud, you practiced on your friends and family. When I was learning to bartend, I just made mixed drinks for everybody, everywhere I was going. And then I got good because I learned a variety of different people's tastes, what they like, what they don't like, what they think could be better. So what do you do with your free time? You know, I think you think it's a euphemism that time equals money. But time doesn't just equal money. Time equals free speech. Because time equals money, and money equals free speech. And if money equals free speech, that means the way you spend your money is speaking. And so what that means is that I can judge your book by your cover. If you're a hugely fat person, I know how you spend your money. When I was eating in that Christ Kitchen, that free cafeteria, I watched a lot of people walk in there who obviously had food stamps, who even obviously had jobs and homes, who just couldn't manage the status symbols, their idols, well enough to remember that your first and most basic need is food. You can sleep anywhere. In the ancient world, you did. You just slept wherever you dropped. There were no homes. There were no tents, shelters like that. Nothing like that. You just slept wherever you dropped in a big group of humans. Like the deer that live out here. I think I have a few videos showing you their sleeping spots, and how I was able to find this secluded spot was by following deer sign. I followed deer trail. Literally, I just followed deer trail through the high grass until I found a big spot of grass that had been matted down in a fairly large circle. Well, that's how our deepest human ancestors found beds. They went and found gorilla shelters and Neanderthal shelters. This is how we explored and colonized the whole world, humans. This is how we have such genetic diversity. This is why we look so different, why we've adapted to so many different environments. We just followed the animals that went in there and did what the animals were doing. Well, do you know how to study animals? Do you even know how to study your environment? Do you know how to walk into an environment and know whether you're going to fit in or not? You know, I'm still thinking about being the new guy and all the skills that come along with being a new guy. And maybe that's what the next video needs to be. Maybe I just need to sit down and write a list of every way that you could benefit by learning to be the new guy. And so I'm going to leave you at the 20-minute mark with a question. How do you spend your free money?